Why did the room fall silent the moment her small voice refused to break? The police lobby was a place of noise, of impatient footsteps, of clipped voices behind counters, of radios humming static. But when the girl said it, trembling yet unshaken, the air tightened. She stood in front of the desk, no taller than the paperwork piles stacked around her, a backpack slung across her thin shoulders, braids brushing her cheek. Her eyes shimmered with humiliation, but her chin stayed high. My mom is in special forces. When she gets here, you'll regret laughing. A few chuckles had already rolled across the lobby, like stones skipping on water. The white cop behind the desk leaned back in his chair, arms folded, lips curled into the kind of smirk that wasn't just disbelief, it was dismissal. A grown man mocking a child. Special forces. His laugh was loud, deliberate, designed for an audience. Kid, do you even know what that means? You've been watching too much TV. Your mom's probably cleaning floors somewhere, not fighting terrorists. The girl's hands clenched the straps of her backpack. She wanted to cry, but something in her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Never let them shrink you. So she didn't cry. She stood, she held. The others in the lobby, a young couple waiting for paperwork, an older man filling out a report, a mother with her restless toddler, exchanged glances. Some smiled awkwardly, others just looked down. It wasn't their fight. The laughter seemed safer to join than the silence. But the girl knew something they didn't. She knew the rhythm of boots on gravel, the cold emptiness of nights where her mother hadn't been home for weeks, the quiet promise in phone calls that could never explain details. She knew what scars looked like when the sleeves were rolled up. She knew her mother's eyes, sharp, tired, unyielding. And soon so would they. The cop smirked wider, clearly satisfied with himself. But before he could turn away, it happened. The sound of boots. Not the clumsy shuffle of office shoes, not the hollow tap of heels, heavy, certain, carrying weight. They struck the tiled floor like a drumbeat. Every head turned. Through the glass doors walked a woman in fatigues, tall, broad-shouldered, her posture like a drawn bow. Her face carried lines not of age but of battles endured, and across her forearm ran a scar that made people look twice, then quickly away. Her presence didn't ask for attention. It demanded it. The girl's heart leapt, but she didn't move. She wanted them to see. The cop leaned forward in his chair, still smirking. "Oh, great," he muttered. "Halloween came early." But then a clang. She dropped a military badge onto his desk. Not gentle, not loud by volume, but heavy by meaning. The smirk faltered. Silence wrapped the room. Her eyes didn't waver from his. "You think my daughter lies? 15 years. 15 years of my life given to this country, and you sit here mocking children." Her voice was low, measured. "Tell me, who should people respect, you or me?" The cop tried to laugh, but it caught in his throat. His mouth opened, but no words came. And then his radio screamed. "All units, armed suspect outside the station. Shots fired. Backup needed immediately." The lobby erupted. Chairs scraped. The toddler wailed. People pressed against the walls. The cop fumbled for his gun, fingers trembling. His smirk was gone, replaced with the pale sheen of fear. The woman didn't flinch. She moved with the stillness of someone trained for chaos. She looked once at her daughter, then back at the room. "Stay here," she said, calm, commanding, absolute. And before anyone could stop her, she was already moving, fast, controlled, purposeful. The lobby's glass doors swung shut behind her, and the girl felt the room's breath hitch. Strangers whispered, straining to see through the window. The cop rose clumsily, almost tripping over his chair, gun half drawn but useless in his shaking hands. Outside, the suspect paced with a weapon, yelling words no one could fully catch. His voice cracked with panic, with the kind of desperation that made ordinary men dangerous. A few officers huddled near squad cars, unsure, waiting for someone braver to arrive. She didn't wait. In less than 10 seconds, the woman closed the distance. Her movements weren't frantic, they were precise, fluid, rehearsed by years of repetition. A grip, a twist, the weapon clattered onto the asphalt. The suspect went down hard, pinned by a knee, his arm locked so tight he howled. The bystanders inside gasped, hands pressed to glass. The cop, frozen halfway through the doorframe, could only watch. And then it was over. The suspect was disarmed, restrained, breathing but defeated. The woman stood, brushed the dust from her uniform as if nothing had happened, and walked back inside. The badge still glinted on the desk where she had left it. The cop swallowed, pale, his hand still hovering near his holster like a child caught pretending. Her eyes locked on him. "Next time you laugh at a child," she said, her tone not raised but sharp enough to cut, "remember this moment. Respect is earned, not mocked." No one moved. Then slowly, as if pulled by an unseen current, the lobby broke into quiet applause. It wasn't wild or loud. It was the kind of clapping that carried shame for not believing sooner. The cop lowered his head. His smirk was gone, replaced with something far smaller, humiliation. The girl moved then, finally, and wrapped her arms around her mother's waist. She pressed her face against the familiar uniform, whispering with pride that trembled through every syllable. "I told them you were a hero, Mama." Her mother bent down, kissed her temple softly, and smiled. "And I told you, never let anyone make you feel small. You carry strength in your blood." The applause faded, the lobby settled, but something had changed, an unspoken shift in the way strangers saw one another. Respect not demanded, not mocked, earned. And the girl, standing taller than before, understood. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The applause faded slowly, like echoes in a canyon. The room, still charged with awe, settled into a quiet no one dared break. The cop who had laughed now seemed smaller than his uniform, his hand twitching nervously on the desk. He didn't look at the woman, nor at the girl who hugged her tightly. He looked at the floor, anywhere but at them. But the little girl didn't care about him anymore. Her world was filled with the familiar steadiness of her mother's heartbeat against the uniform, the faint scent of metal and dust that never seemed to wash away, the warmth of safety only her mother could bring. And yet, as she pulled back and looked up, her eyes carried questions she had never dared to ask aloud. Because today had changed something. The world had seen her mother the way she always had, powerful, unshaken, a hero. But with that came the reminder of everything unknown. "Mom," she whispered, almost afraid of the answer, "how many times have you done that?" Her mother's gaze softened, though her jaw remained tight. "Enough," she said, a single word but heavy enough to silence further questions. The girl wanted to press, to ask enough to save lives, enough to kill, but the look in her mother's eyes stopped her. It wasn't anger, it was weight. The kind of weight that could crush if left on a child's shoulders. So she didn't ask, not yet. Instead, she followed as her mother turned and strode toward the exit. The lobby parted for her like water around a stone. People stepped aside, some nodding in respect, others avoiding her gaze, as if ashamed of their earlier laughter. The cop remained frozen at his desk. His mouth opened once, then closed again, no sound emerging. For the first time in his career, words, his sharpest weapon, had abandoned him. As the glass doors shut behind them, the girl clutched her mother's hand tightly. Outside, the suspect was already being loaded into a squad car by officers who looked as though they'd just been handed a lifeline. Their eyes followed the woman, not with the doubt of before, but with something closer to reverence. She ignored it. Praise never meant as much to her as silence. The girl, however, felt it all. The pride, the vindication, the proof. She had defended her mother's name and been laughed at, but now the truth stood undeniable. And yet beneath her pride was something else. Curiosity. Because she realized that while everyone else was meeting her mother for the first time, in some ways, so was she. They walked home in silence, their neighborhood still buzzing with late afternoon life. Children played in yards, music drifted from porches, and the smell of someone grilling lingered in the air. But in the girl's mind, the world was louder than ever. She replayed every detail. The clang of the badge, the swiftness of the takedown, the way her mother's voice sliced through arrogance like a blade. "Mom," she finally asked. Her mother glanced down, her expression unreadable. "Why don't you ever tell people what you do? Why let them laugh at me, at us?" Her mother didn't answer right away. Her boots struck the pavement with their steady rhythm, each step measured as though even walking was a kind of discipline. Finally, she said, "Because respect shouted is respect lost. You don't tell people who you are. You show them when it matters." The girl frowned, but it hurt when he laughed. Her mother squeezed her hand. "And you stood tall anyway. That matters more than shutting him up." The girl absorbed this quietly, but her mind wasn't satisfied. She had stood tall, yes, but only because she knew her mother would come. What about the times she wasn't there? What about the nights when fear filled the house, when her mother's voice was only a distant echo on the other end of a phone line? Her mother must have seen the shadow pass across her daughter's face because she stopped walking. She knelt down so they were eye to eye. "You carry strength in your blood," she repeated softly, the words more intimate now, not meant for the world but for her daughter alone. "But strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's being still. Sometimes it's enduring. You understand?" The girl nodded, though part of her didn't. How could she? She was only beginning to see the cracks in the armor her mother wore. That night the girl lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the events of the day still swirling in her mind. She thought of the cop's smirk, the silence when her mother walked in, the way fear had replaced arrogance in seconds. She thought of how quickly her mother had subdued the suspect, how natural it had looked, like breathing. And she thought of the scars she had glimpsed on her mother's arm. Scars that had stories, stories her mother never told. Her eyes grew heavy, and just before sleep claimed her, she whispered to the darkness, "One day I'll know everything." In the living room, her mother sat alone, the glow of a single lamp casting shadows across her face. Her uniform jacket hung neatly on the back of a chair, but she herself looked restless, her leg bouncing faintly, her hand wrapped around a glass of water she hadn't touched. She replayed the day too, but differently. The laughter didn't sting her. She had endured worse. What lingered was the sight of her daughter's trembling chin, the weight of tears she hadn't let fall. Her daughter had stood tall, yes, but she had been forced to, because of a man's arrogance, because of her own silence. Was she protecting her child by hiding the truth, or was she condemning her to carry doubt alone? Her eyes drifted to the badge resting on the table. 15 years of service. 15 years of missions whispered about but never acknowledged. 15 years of sacrifices made in shadows. And yet, in that lobby, all it had taken was a smirk to make her daughter feel small. The thought gnawed at her. She had taught her daughter resilience, but had she taught her enough? The water remained untouched. The lamp burned low. And in the silence, the soldier felt a familiar weight pressing in, the kind of weight that no uniform could lift. Meanwhile, at the station, the cop sat alone at his desk long after his shift had ended. The laughter that once gave him power now echoed in his mind as mockery of himself. Every glance from his colleagues felt sharper, heavier. He could still hear the clang of the badge, still see the woman's unflinching eyes, still feel the humiliation of being stripped of authority in front of a child. His jaw tightened, shame curdled into resentment. Respect earned. The words haunted him. And in the darkness of that empty station, he muttered under his breath, a promise born not of reflection but of bitterness. "We'll see who earns what." The story wasn't over, not for him, not for the soldier, not for the girl. Because sometimes respect doesn't end with applause, it begins with conflict. Morning light crept through thin curtains, painting the walls in pale gold. The girl stirred awake, her eyes fluttering against the brightness. For a moment she forgot the events of yesterday. For a moment it was just another Saturday, the air quiet, the house smelling faintly of brewed coffee. But then she remembered. The smirk, the badge, the takedown, the applause. And her mother's words, "Respect is earned, not mocked." She sat up quickly, as if eager to relive it all again, to confirm that it hadn't been some dream her heart had conjured. She padded to the living room in her socks, hair still tousled, but the sight that greeted her froze her in place. Her mother sat at the dining table, not in uniform but in a plain gray t-shirt. Her forearms rested on the wood, bare, unguarded, and on them the scars. Thin, jagged lines, some pale with age, others darker, fresher, a map of battles carried home. The girl's breath caught. Her mother noticed and instinctively pulled her arms back, crossing them. But it was too late. The image was already carved into her daughter's mind. "Morning," her mother said softly, forcing normalcy. The girl swallowed, "Morning." For the first time, the question she had held back all her life pressed forward, heavy, insistent. "Did it hurt?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother hesitated. "Which part?" The girl pointed at the scars. Her mother's eyes lowered to her arms as if seeing them anew. She was silent for a long time, and the girl feared she wouldn't answer at all. But then her voice came, low and steady. "Pain fades, but memory doesn't." The girl tilted her head. "Memory of what?" Her mother's gaze drifted toward the window, as if searching the sunlight for something far away. "Of why you got them, of who you couldn't save, of what it cost." The words hung heavy, and the girl felt the urge to press further. But her mother's eyes, sharp and distant, warned her to stop. Later that day, the girl found herself at the community park. Kids ran across the grass, laughter echoing, but she sat alone on the swings. Her friends had asked her to play, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought of her mother's scars, of the way she had gone silent after speaking of memory and cost. She thought of the badge dropped on the desk, the weight it carried. And she thought of the cop's face, his humiliation, his pale, sweating silence. A chill passed over her. Somewhere deep down, she knew it wasn't over. People like him didn't just forget. At the station, her intuition proved right. The cop, Officer Dale Morton, sat in the break room, replaying the scene in his mind for the 100th time. His colleagues had stopped making eye contact with him. A few had even whispered jokes behind his back about how the Special Forces lady had done his job better than he ever could. Each word was a cut, each laugh a reminder. But what burned most wasn't their ridicule, it was his own shame. How had a child seen through him so easily? How had a woman in uniform, a woman, stripped his authority so completely? His fingers tightened around his coffee mug until his knuckles whitened. He had told himself for years that the badge made him someone, that the uniform gave him respect, but yesterday had shattered that illusion. And in the ruins, bitterness grew. "She thinks she's better than me," he muttered, "just because she's been over there." He slammed the mug down and stood. No one stopped him. He had decided, if respect was earned, then he would take his back. That night the soldier dreamed. Not of yesterday, but of a desert half a world away. The air was dry, sand stinging her face like glass. The sound of rotors thundered above as a helicopter descended in a storm of dust. She and her team crouched low, rifles gripped tight, eyes scanning the horizon. A voice crackled in her earpiece, urgent, strained. "Civilians trapped in the compound. Insurgents closing in. Extraction window 7 minutes. "Copy," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos. She remembered the sprint, the gunfire, the screaming. She remembered shoving open a door and finding them, a family huddled in the corner, eyes wide with terror. She remembered pulling them out, one by one, covering their escape. And she remembered the child. A boy no older than her own daughter clutching a tattered stuffed animal. She had reached for him, urged him forward, but the explosion came first. Her ears had rung, her body thrown against stone. When the dust cleared, the boy was gone. She woke with a start, sweat clinging to her skin, the memory sharper than the scars it had left. In the silence of her bedroom, she pressed her palms to her eyes and breathed, deep, steady, but the weight remained. Because no matter how many missions she had survived, no matter how many lives she had saved, the faces of the ones she hadn't were the ones that stayed. The next morning, the girl noticed the dark circles under her mother's eyes. She didn't ask about them. She already knew the answer would be silence. But silence spoke too, and it told her that her mother carried more than anyone could see. "Mom," she said quietly as they ate breakfast, "do you ever get tired?" Her mother looked up, startled. For a moment she almost laughed at the simplicity of the question, but then she saw her daughter's eyes, serious, searching. "Yes," she admitted, "but tired doesn't mean weak, it means human." The girl nodded, though her heart ached. She wanted her mother to be unbreakable, untouchable, but now she saw the truth. Even heroes bled. Meanwhile, Officer Morton was busy digging. Records, files, anything he could use to chip away at the image of the soldier who had humiliated him. He told himself it was about justice, about fairness, that no one should be above scrutiny. But deep down, he knew it was about something smaller, something uglier. Pride. And as he scrolled through databases, making calls, asking quiet questions, a thought settled into his mind. Everyone has a weakness, even her. That evening, the soldier sat with her daughter on the porch, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The sky burned orange, fading into purple, a reminder that endings could be beautiful too. Her daughter leaned against her, quiet for a long time before speaking. "Mom," she said softly, "what if I'm not strong like you?" Her mother looked down, her chest tightening. She brushed a braid from her daughter's face and whispered, "Strength isn't about being like me. It's about being like you, standing tall even when they laugh, holding on even when you're scared. That's strength." The girl's eyes glistened, but she smiled. For a moment, the world was still. But the soldier knew storms always came after calm. And somewhere, beyond the porch, beyond the sunset, trouble was already moving closer. Because scars don't just stay on skin. They echo. They draw the past into the present. And they remind you, peace is never permanent. The week passed in fragments, school mornings, quiet dinners, late nights where silence filled the house heavier than words. To the girl, life felt both the same and entirely different. At school, whispers followed her. "That's the girl whose mom tackled a guy with a gun outside the station." "No way," my brother said, "she's lying. Cops do that stuff, not moms." "I saw it on Tick, dude. Somebody posted it." The voices buzzed behind her back like gnats, sometimes mocking, sometimes impressed. She tried to ignore them, but every laugh, every glance pulled her back to the lobby, to the smirk that had cut her down before her mother silenced it. She carried herself taller now, but inside, a new unease bloomed. Attention wasn't always respect, it could also be envy, and envy could be cruel. At the police station, Officer Dale Morton nursed his humiliation like an untreated wound. The story had spread beyond the walls, whispered by civilians, echoed in the locker room, even joked about by fellow officers. She disarmed him faster than you could even unholster Morton. Better let her run the station next time. Guess Special Forces training beats desk duty, huh? Each word scraped his pride raw. So he acted. Not openly, cowards rarely do. Instead, he began planting seeds. A call here, a question there. He knew which channels to use, which ears to whisper into. "Yeah, she's Special Forces, but you ever wonder why she's not still active duty? Heard things. Not all good." By the time his shift ended, the rumor had begun to grow legs. whispers about her service, questions about whether she'd been discharged clean, suspicion that the scars weren't just from battles but from mistakes. Morton leaned back in his chair, satisfied. If respect was earned, then so was doubt. And he would make sure doubt spread. That evening, the girl sat at the kitchen table, scribbling in her notebook while her mother prepared dinner. The scent of garlic and onions filled the air, the sizzle of the pan breaking the silence. But the girl's pencil stilled. "Mom." "Yes." "Why don't people believe you?" Her mother paused, spatula midair. "What do you mean?" "At school, some kids say it's fake, that you're not real," her voice faltered, "that you're just making it up." Her mother set the spatula down, the pan crackling unattended. She turned slowly, her face unreadable, her eyes searching her daughter's. "Do you believe them?" The girl shook her head fiercely. "No, I saw you." Her mother's shoulders softened. She walked over, crouched down, and took her daughter's hands. "Then that's enough." But the girl wasn't satisfied. "Why don't you tell them everything, about the missions, about what you've done?" Her mother's lips tightened. "Because some truths don't set you free, they cage you." The girl didn't fully understand, but she felt the finality in her mother's tone, the line that would not be crossed. Later that night, after the dishes were cleaned and the house was quiet, the soldier sat alone with her thoughts. The scars on her arms itched with phantom memories. She pressed her fingers against them, as if holding back ghosts. Her mind pulled her back to the desert, the compound, the explosion. The boy's eyes haunted her, wide with terror, then gone in dust and fire. She gritted her teeth, forcing the memory down. But it wouldn't stay buried. Because ghosts don't ask permission. They return when silence gives them room. Across town, Morton wasn't silent. He made calls to an old contact in the Guard, pushing harder, asking questions he had no business asking. Words like classified and redacted only fueled him further. If there were skeletons in her service record, he would find them. And if there weren't, he would create them. Humiliation demanded repayment. And he had chosen his target. The next morning, the girl noticed the way neighbors looked at her mother as they walked to the car. Not openly hostile, but cautious, appraising. A woman at the end of the street, usually friendly, waved only half-heartedly. A man across the way, usually chatty, pulled his dog inside instead of saying hello. The girl clutched her backpack straps. "Why are they looking at you like that?" she whispered. Her mother kept her eyes forward, her jaw set. She didn't answer. Because she already knew. Whispers move faster than truth. At school, the girl's friend Sarah leaned close, eyes wide with the kind of curiosity children carry, without understanding the weight of it. "My dad said your mom's not a real soldier anymore," she whispered. "That she got sent home because she messed up." The word stabbed. The girl's face burned hot, her throat tightening. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to defend. But the image of her mother's tired eyes, her scars, her silence held her still. Instead, she simply whispered back, "You don't know anything." But inside, the seed of doubt gnawed. That night, her mother came home later than usual, her uniform still crisp, but her eyes darker than before. The girl sat at the kitchen table waiting, homework untouched, questions boiling. "Mom," she asked as the door shut. "Yes." "Why don't they believe you?" Her mother sighed, placing her keys on the counter with more force than necessary. "Because people would rather believe a rumor than a truth they don't understand." The girl blinked, confused. "But why?" Her mother turned, her face shadowed by the dim kitchen light. "Because real strength scares people, and fear makes them cruel." The girl shivered at the quiet intensity in her mother's voice. Meanwhile, Officer Morton smiled to himself in the dim glow of his laptop. The whispers had spread farther than he imagined. Posts on local forums, threads questioning her service, speculation about her scars. Each keystroke was another stone cast into the water, ripples spreading wider. And he knew, sooner or later, those ripples would reach her. Then maybe she wouldn't look so untouchable. Maybe she'd know what it felt like to be laughed at. Back at home, the soldier stood on the porch after putting her daughter to bed. The night was cool, the stars sharp against the sky. She looked up, exhaling slowly. The weight of memory pressed against her. The mission, the lives saved, the lives lost. The silence she had chosen to protect her daughter. But silence had a cost, and now whispers threatened to drown them both. She closed her eyes, the image of the boy in the desert flashing again. "You carry strength in your blood," she had told her daughter. But strength, she knew, wasn't always enough. Because shadows had begun to follow them home. And shadows never came without teeth. The call came on a Tuesday evening. The soldier had just set a steaming pot of stew on the table, her daughter already seated with spoon in hand, when her phone buzzed with the clipped tone reserved for official calls. She hesitated only a second before answering. The voice on the other end said, low and serious, "It's Lieutenant Hawkins. We need to talk." Her shoulders stiffened. "About?" "Your record being pulled again. Somebody's asking questions. Somebody loud enough to make waves." Her jaw tightened. "Who?" "That's the problem. We don't know yet, but whatever being stirred, it's not coming from inside. Be careful." The line went dead before she could ask more. Her daughter watched her silently, spoon unmoving. "Was that about you?" The soldier forced calm into her voice. "Just work, baby. Nothing for you to worry about." But the unease in her chest told her otherwise. At school, the daughter felt the storm more directly. "Hey, hero girl," a boy sneered as she walked past. "Where's your fake army mom today? Probably hiding because she got kicked out." Laughter rippled around him. The girl clenched her fists but didn't stop walking. Her mother's words echoed, "Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's being still." But being still burned. By the time she reached her classroom, her throat ached from holding back words she wanted to scream. At the station, Officer Morton watched with satisfaction as the whispers he'd planted grew into rumors. He leaned casually against the counter while another officer scrolled through his phone. "Hey, you see this thread? People saying that Special Forces lady wasn't honorably discharged. Something about a mission gone wrong overseas. Classified cover-up." Morton feigned surprise. "Really? Man, if that's true, makes you wonder what she's hiding, huh?" The hook was set. He didn't need to destroy her with proof. Doubt was enough. And doubt was spreading like wildfire. That night the soldier sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the folder on her nightstand. Inside were papers she had never shown her daughter, commendations, mission briefs, classified reports, the silent testimony of years lived in shadows. She could open it, she could show the world. But she didn't. Because truth wasn't free. Truth carried names, operations, places that couldn't be spoken aloud. And truth, once out, could never be caged again. Her scars itched, her memories restless. She closed the folder, hands trembling. The daughter, restless herself, lay awake in her room. The words from school repeated in her head, fake army mom, kicked out, cover-up. She hated them, hated the kids who said them, but most of all she hated the part of her that wondered, what if they weren't just lies? She turned her face into her pillow, muffling a frustrated sob. She wanted to believe with her whole heart. She wanted her mother to be untouchable, undeniable. But the silence her mother always kept left cracks, and into cracks doubt always seeps. 2 days later it escalated. A reporter showed up at their door. "Ma'am, do you have a moment?" the man asked, microphone in hand, cameraman behind him. His smile was polite, but his eyes were sharp. "We've been receiving tips about your military record, claims that you were discharged for misconduct. Care to comment?" The soldier's face didn't move, but her chest burned with fury. No comment. The reporter pressed. "Ma'am, are you denying the allegations? Do you think the public deserves to know the truth?" The daughter peeked from behind the doorframe, her heart hammering. Allegations. Misconduct. Words too big, too sharp, stabbing into her. Her mother stepped forward, blocking the camera's view of the house. "This is private property. Leave." The reporter's smile never faltered, but his voice carried triumph. "Of course. Thank you for your time." The camera light clicked off. The van pulled away. But the damage was done. Neighbors had seen. And by morning, the video was online. The comments stung more than bullets. Called it, "Nobody gets out of special forces without skeletons." She looked guilty as hell. Bet she hurt civilians overseas. That's why it's classified. Her poor kid. Imagine finding out your mom's a fraud. The soldier didn't read them, but her daughter did. Against every instinct, she scrolled, each word carving deeper. By the time she closed the screen, her hands shook. That evening, the girl finally broke. "Mom," she shouted, standing in the kitchen doorway, tears streaming. "Why won't you just tell me the truth? Why won't you tell anyone?" Her mother froze, dish in hand, eyes locking on her daughter's trembling form. The girl's voice cracked. "They're calling you a liar. They're saying you hurt people, and you just stand there like it doesn't matter." Her mother set the dish down, slow, deliberate. She crossed the room, kneeling until they were eye to eye. Her voice was calm, but her eyes glistened. "It matters to me, but truth isn't always safe, and some things you're not old enough to carry yet." The girl shook her head. "I don't care, I'm already carrying it, every day, at school, online, everywhere. You're not the only one people mock." The words hit harder than any battlefield memory. The soldier reached out, pulling her daughter into her arms. The girl resisted at first, stiff, angry, but then she collapsed into the embrace, sobbing. "I just want them to see you the way I do," the girl whispered. Her mother closed her eyes. "One day they will, but today it's enough that you do." But outside their home, Morton was watching. Not from afar, not through screens, but from the street corner, his unmarked car idling. His face was shadowed, his eyes fixed on the house. He had lit the fire. Now he was waiting to see what burned. Inside, the soldier stood at the window long after her daughter fell asleep, staring out into the night. She felt the walls closing in, not from enemies abroad, but from whispers at home. She had fought in deserts, jungles, cities torn apart by war. She had faced men with guns, bombs, hatred in their eyes. But this battle was different. This battle was silence. Rumors, shadows, doubt. The kind of fight that didn't end with a mission complete, but with a reputation shredded, a child broken, a legacy erased. Her fists clenched at her sides. She had told her daughter that respect is earned, not mocked. But now she wondered, what if respect could also be stolen? And if it could, how far would she go to take it back? Because the enemy wasn't overseas anymore. The enemy was here, closer than she realized. And he was already moving his next piece. The soldier had been in firefights before. She knew the rhythm of fear, gunfire cracking, sand exploding, shouts mixing with the thunder of helicopters. In those moments, danger was visible, tangible. You could face it head on. But this war was different. It came in whispers, in the averted eyes of neighbors, in the silence of colleagues, in the sting of her daughter's tears. And that made it worse, because you can't fight what you can't see. The shift in the neighborhood was undeniable now. The man across the street no longer waved. The friendly woman at the corner store kept her smile thin, her questions sharp. Even the mailman lingered less, dropping letters with a caution that hadn't been there before. The soldier noticed every detail. Her daughter noticed more. At school, the bullying had sharpened. Notes slipped into her locker, fraud's kid. Words whispered in hallways, her mom's a criminal. Even teachers gave her sidelong looks, unsure of what was true, unwilling to risk taking her side. One afternoon, Sarah, the friend who had once played with her every day, sat at a different lunch table. The girl stared, tray untouched, the weight of isolation pressing in. By the time she came home, she didn't speak a word, just trudged past her mother, eyes down, backpack hanging heavy. The soldier watched her daughter disappear into her room and felt something inside her fracture. She had fought to keep her child safe, but her silence, once a shield, was now cutting both of them open. Meanwhile, Officer Morton's satisfaction curdled into obsession. The more the rumors spread, the more power he felt, but power once tasted demanded more. He wanted her destroyed, not just doubted. So he dug deeper. He scoured military contacts, leaning on favors, fabricating stories when doors closed. He pieced together fragments of reports, spinning them into narratives. Civilian casualties, he whispered. Cover-ups. Missions gone wrong. Each lie carried enough truth to sound plausible. And plausibility was poison. It seeped into forums, comment sections, conversations at bars. Soon, it wasn't just locals whispering. It was strangers across the internet, dissecting her life like vultures around a carcass. Morton leaned back one night, scrolling through a thread where hundreds debated her guilt. A grin stretched across his face. "This is how you earn respect," he muttered, "by taking it back." That night the soldier dreamed again. Not of victory, but of failure. The boy's eyes haunted her, wide, terrified, then gone in smoke. She saw her team too, brothers and sisters in arms, their faces blurred by memory, their voices echoes. She remembered the radio static, the desperate calls for backup that never came. And she remembered the silence after. The silence of those who never made it home. She jolted awake, heart pounding, breath ragged. Her hands shook as she reached for the glass of water on her nightstand. But the water sloshed out, her grip unsteady. She stared at the spill, at the trembling reflection of her face, and whispered, "Why does the past never stay buried?" The room gave no answer, only the silence of shadows. The daughter, too, had begun keeping secrets. One evening, while her mother cooked, she scrolled her phone under the table, eyes darting to make sure she wasn't caught. She read the comments, the cruel ones, the ones that said her mother was a fraud, a liar, a danger. And the more she read, the more the seed of doubt grew. What if they're right? What if Mom isn't telling me everything? She hated herself for even thinking it, but the silence made space for those thoughts, and once they started, they wouldn't stop. Later, when her mother asked how her day was, she just mumbled fine and ran to her room. Behind her closed door, she cried into her pillow, torn between love and uncertainty. The soldier noticed. Of course she noticed. But she didn't know how to bridge the gap without unleashing truths too heavy for her daughter to carry. So she stayed silent. And silence, again, became the loudest sound in the house. Morton's escalation came next. One night after his shift, he parked down the street from her home, engine off, lights dim. He watched the windows, the faint glow of lamps inside. His chest tightened with a twisted mix of anger and excitement. She had humiliated him. She had stripped him bare in front of others. Now he would strip her. Not just her reputation. Her life. He pulled out his phone, snapping photos through the windshield. A shadow against the blinds. The silhouette of her daughter at the window. Evidence, maybe. Leverage, definitely. He grinned, whispering to himself, "Respect is earned, huh? Let's see how much respect you've got when they see you can't even protect your kid." The next morning, the soldier found an envelope on her porch. No return address. Inside, photos. Her daughter at the window, alone. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just whispers anymore. This was a threat. She scanned the street, fists clenching, but saw nothing. Just the quiet suburban morning, kids waiting for buses, neighbors sipping coffee. But she knew. The enemy was close. Too close. Her daughter found her standing there, envelope trembling in her hand. "Mom," the girl asked softly. The soldier quickly shoved the photos back inside, forcing calm into her voice. "Nothing, just junk mail." But her daughter saw the tightness in her jaw, the way her eyes scanned the horizon like she was back on patrol. And for the first time, the girl felt truly afraid. Because if her mother, the strongest person she knew, looked like that, then whatever they were facing must be worse than anything she could imagine. That evening, the soldier sat on the porch with the envelope beside her. Her daughter had gone to bed, but she couldn't sleep. She stared at the photos again, the proof that their lives were no longer private. This was no longer about humiliation. This was about intimidation. And intimidation was the first step toward something worse. Her training screamed at her: assess, secure, neutralize. But this wasn't a battlefield, this was home. And the rules here were different. Or maybe they were. Maybe the battlefield had just followed her home. She closed her eyes, breathing steady, a decision forming in her chest. If the enemy wanted a war, they'd get one. But this time, she wasn't fighting for medals or missions. She was fighting for her daughter. And for that, she would burn the world down if she had to. Across town, Morton poured himself another drink, staring at the photos on his phone. His smile was lazy, satisfied. He didn't know yet that he had crossed a line. A line that separated rumors from war. And war was the one place she had never lost. The soldier had lived through ambushes before. In Afghanistan, in Iraq, in nameless corners of the world where desert winds carried the smell of gunpowder, she'd learned that danger never announced itself politely. It arrived suddenly, in the lull between footsteps, in the silence before a radio crackled, in the false calm that made you lower your guard. Now, standing in her kitchen with the envelope of photos in her hand, she felt that same silence pressing in. But this wasn't a war zone, this was home. And yet her instincts told her, war had found its way here. Her daughter noticed the change before anyone else. Her mother moved differently now, checking locks twice, keeping curtains drawn, walking the perimeter of the house before bed, small details that looked like habit but carried an undercurrent of tension. The girl didn't say anything at first. She knew better, but each tightened jaw, each distracted glance at the window made her chest ache. Her mother had always been her rock, steady, immovable. Now that rock looked like it was waiting for an earthquake. And earthquakes, she knew, didn't ask permission. Officer Morton was the earthquake. But he didn't see himself that way. In his mind, he was justice. The photos he'd taken gave him leverage, yes, but leverage wasn't enough anymore. He wanted her broken, wanted her reputation destroyed, her daughter ashamed, her uniform stripped of meaning. He had convinced himself this wasn't obsession, it was balance. She had humiliated him, so he would humiliate her. She had stolen respect from him, so he would steal it back. And in his self-made war, there were no civilians. Only casualties. The first real strike came on a Thursday afternoon. The soldier was driving home from picking up her daughter when she noticed the car in her mirror. It stayed behind them through 3 turns, headlights lingering like eyes. Her daughter hummed quietly beside her, flipping through a notebook, unaware. The soldier's grip tightened on the wheel. She made a sudden turn down a side street. The car followed. Another turn, another. Still there. Her training screamed at her, pursuit. She slowed at a stop sign, her heart steady but her mind calculating. Her daughter glanced up. "Mom." "It's fine," the soldier said calmly, too calmly. But when she finally pulled into their driveway and the car rolled slowly past, her daughter saw the tension in her mother's shoulders. And for the first time she realized, maybe Mom wasn't untouchable. Maybe danger was closer than either of them thought. That night the soldier pulled the blinds, her eyes on the street. Morton's face flashed in her mind. Not his smirk from the lobby, not his pale humiliation after she disarmed the suspect, but the twisted satisfaction she imagined he carried now. He was escalating. And escalation had only one end. The daughter, restless, finally spoke the words she'd been holding. "Mom, are we in danger?" Her mother froze, caught between honesty and protection. She wanted to lie, to say no, to promise safety, but lies don't hold weight under pressure, and her daughter was old enough to see through them. "Yes," she said softly, "but danger isn't new, and we're not helpless." The girl's eyes shimmered. "But it's different this time, isn't it? It's not out there." She pointed toward the distant horizon, the way her teachers talked about wars overseas. Her voice shook. "It's here." Her mother's chest tightened. She nodded once. "Yes, it's here." And in that moment something shifted. The girl wasn't just a child anymore. She was part of the fight. Morton struck again the next day. Anonymous emails, dozens of them, to the school board, to neighbors, to local press. Attachments, doctored images, fabricated reports, twisted versions of her service record. Enough to look authentic, enough to ignite suspicion. By evening the phone rang nonstop. Journalists, concerned neighbors, even her daughter's principal. The soldier answered none of them. But her daughter overheard the voicemails. Serious questions about your discharge. Allegations of misconduct overseas. For the safety of the community, we must. The girl pressed her hands over her ears, but the words leaked through anyway. By bedtime, she was curled under her blanket, silent tears soaking her pillow. The soldier found her like that, asleep but restless, fists clenched even in dreams. She brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead and whispered, "I swore I'd keep you safe. I didn't think I'd have to keep you safe from this." Her voice trembled, the first crack in armor her daughter never saw. That weekend, the breaking point came. Saturday morning, bright sun, normal streets. The soldier stepped onto the porch to grab the newspaper when she saw it. Spray paint across her garage door. Liar. Killer. Fraud. The letters screamed in red, dripping down the white paint like blood. Her daughter gasped from behind her, hand clamped over her mouth. The soldier's stomach dropped, not at the words they'd called her worse overseas, but at the sight of her daughter staring at them. Because those words weren't meant for her. They were meant for the girl. For the bystanders. For anyone watching. Morton had turned her home into a battlefield. And this time, there was no walking away. That night, after the police came and left with their empty reassurances, the soldier sat at the kitchen table, head bowed, hands clasped. Her daughter sat across from her, eyes wide, waiting. Finally, the soldier spoke. "Do you know what war really is?" she asked quietly. Her daughter shook her head. "It's not bullets, it's not bombs, it's people trying to make you feel powerless, to make you doubt who you are, to make you forget your strength." She looked up, her eyes burning. "And we don't forget, do you understand? We don't let them take that." The girl nodded slowly, the weight of her mother's words sinking in. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't just a child being protected. She was a soldier's daughter. And that meant something. Across town, Morton sat in his car, staring at the glow of her house in the distance. He had crossed lines, but he felt no guilt. Only hunger. Because the more he tore at her, the more alive he felt. And in the twisted corridors of his mind, he convinced himself, this was justice. "This is how respect is earned," he muttered again, gripping the steering wheel tight. He didn't realize yet that he had pushed too far. That the woman inside that house had faced worse than him. That when cornered, she wouldn't cower. She would fight. And soon, very soon, their war would no longer be waged in whispers. It would explode into the open. Her daughter didn't sleep that night. She lay awake, listening to the creaks of the house, the faint hum of traffic, the heavy silence of her mother standing guard just outside her door. And though fear churned in her stomach, another feeling grew beneath it. Pride. Because even broken, even mocked, her mother still stood. And that, she realized, was strength. The kind you couldn't spray paint over. The kind that whispers could never erase. The soldier knew war had arrived on her doorstep. Spray-painted slurs on the garage door, anonymous emails, stalking cars that lingered too long, and now the silence of a neighborhood that had once smiled, now watching from behind curtains as if waiting for her to fall. She had seen this before, not in the suburbs of America but in villages overseas, how fear seeped into walls, how rumor spread faster than truth, how one person's lies could rot the ground beneath everyone's feet. And she knew what always came next. Escalation. Her daughter sensed it too. The girl had stopped asking questions at school. She had stopped defending her mother out loud, stopped trying to convince others of what she knew was true. But at home she was quieter, watchful. She studied her mother's movements, her silences, the way she scanned every street they drove down. And though the girl was afraid, beneath the fear something else stirred, an ember of defiance. Because she had seen her mother face worse. She had seen her mother walk into danger without flinching. And even though this war was different, the girl believed her mother would not bow. Morton, however, believed otherwise. In his mind he had her cornered. The rumors had teeth now. The media was circling. Neighbors doubted her. The school questioned her. Her own daughter, he suspected, was breaking under the weight of it all. All it would take was one final push. And he had just the plan. Saturday evening. The soldier and her daughter had just returned from the grocery store when she noticed the garage door, freshly painted white after the vandalism, marked again. This time no words. Just a single red X. Her breath caught. A mark, a target. Her daughter stood frozen beside her, eyes wide, grocery bags dangling from her small hands. The soldier took them gently, setting them aside. "Inside," she said firmly. "But now." The girl obeyed, but her gaze lingered on her mother's face. She had seen fear before, in classmates, in teachers, in strangers. But never in her mother. Until now. That night, after her daughter was asleep, the soldier sat in the dark living room, only the faint glow of a lamp behind her. She didn't need confirmation. She knew it was Morton. And she knew what he wanted. He wanted her reputation. He wanted her pride. But what he didn't understand was that she had already given those up long ago, in deserts and jungles where pride didn't matter, where survival was the only currency. What she hadn't given up, what she would never give up, was her daughter's safety. And that meant one thing. It was time to confront him. The confrontation came faster than she expected. Sunday morning, as church bells rang faintly in the distance and families walked to service, a police cruiser pulled up in front of her house. Morton stepped out, his uniform crisp, his smile sharper than glass. "Morning," he said loudly enough for neighbors to hear. "Mind if we talk?" The soldier stepped onto the porch, spine straight. "If you've got official business, speak it. If not, leave." Morton chuckled, hands on his belt. "Official? No, not today, just a neighborly visit." His eyes flicked toward the window, where a small face peeked out, the daughter watching. The soldier's jaw clenched. "Stay away from her." Morton smirked. "From your kid, why would I, sweet girl, deserves to know the truth about her mother." The soldier stepped down from the porch, closing the distance between them. Her voice dropped low, steel threading every word. "You think this is a game. You think whispers make you strong. but I've buried men stronger than you, men who thought fear was a weapon they could control." Morton's smile faltered just for a second, but he recovered, leaning closer. "You can't scare me, soldier. Not here, not without your uniform. Out here, you're nothing. Out here, people already think you're a liar. All I've got to do is keep talking, and sooner or later, even your little girl will stop believing you." The soldier's hands itched with the memory of combat, of disarming men twice his size, of breaking enemies in the dust. But this wasn't war. Not yet. So she stepped back, her voice calm but deadly. "You've already lost." Morton blinked. "What?" She pointed to the window, to the daughter's eyes burning with defiance as she watched. "She knows who I am. That's all that matters. You can spray your lies on walls, shout them in the streets, drown the world in poison, but you'll never take her belief, and that makes you powerless." Morton's face darkened, his smug veneer cracking. For the first time, he looked less like a man in control and more like a man unraveling. But Morton wasn't done. That night, long after the confrontation, long after the soldier had tucked her daughter into bed, a sound split the silence. Glass shattering. The soldier bolted upright, instincts firing. She grabbed the bat she kept near the door, not a rifle, not a sidearm, but enough. She moved swiftly, silently, years of training guiding each step. In the kitchen, shards glittered across the floor, the window broken, a brick lying among the glass. Taped to it a note. "You don't belong here. Leave, or next time it won't be a brick." The soldier's blood ran cold. Her daughter appeared in the hallway, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Mom." The soldier scooped her into her arms, holding her tight. "It's okay," she whispered, though her voice shook. "I've got you." But inside she knew the truth. It wasn't okay. This had gone beyond whispers, beyond vandalism, beyond intimidation. This was war. The next morning she didn't wait. She drove straight to the precinct, daughter at her side, envelope of photos in her hand, brick wrapped in evidence bag. She walked through the doors head high, eyes locked on Morton. The room went silent. Officers shifted uncomfortably, sensing the storm. She slammed the envelope onto the desk. "This ends now." Morton smirked, opening his mouth, but she cut him off. "You've been stalking my house, taking photos of my daughter, spreading lies about missions you'll never understand, and now you've brought it here." She pulled the brick out, the note still taped. "You want war, Morton. Fine, but you'll face it where it matters, in front of the people who still know what truth means." Gasps rippled. Morton's face drained of color. There's no proof." Her voice thundered. "I've spent 15 years standing against men who thought fear made them powerful. You're not powerful, you're pitiful." And for the first time, the room didn't laugh at her. It turned on him. The investigation moved quickly after that. Other officers stepped forward. Some admitted they'd heard his whispers, his lies. Others shared suspicions of his behavior. Within weeks, Morton was suspended. Within months, he was gone. But the damage he left behind lingered. The soldier still faced stares, still felt the weight of doubt in some corners of her community. Her daughter still carried scars from the bullying, the whispers, the fear. But something else remained too. Strength, because they had faced the storm and stood through it. And in the end, respect wasn't in the headlines or the neighbors' opinions or the uniforms. It was in the daughter's eyes when she looked at her mother. Eyes that no longer wavered with doubt. Eyes that held only pride. On a quiet evening months later, the soldier sat on the porch with her daughter beside her. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and crimson. The girl leaned against her, whispering, "You're still my hero." The soldier smiled softly, scars catching the fading light. "No, baby, you're mine." And in that moment, the war finally felt over. Because respect, the kind that mattered, had already been earned.